notice.
Are you implying that he does not read like many other the bulletin? Or
I didn't say that. You didn't hear that from me. Hey, big guy. Should I call him little baby? Hey, little baby. Yeah. I think you call his son that.
could be worse. It could be Shannon calls Harold.
Oh, no. That's terrible.
I think it's hilarious.
Joyful, joyful, be joyful. Okay.
When I saw him, he was we were in nursing. He was on call all the time. But the next day, Wednesday, he was up in his chair talking about it. And then got him. But when I was there, he wasn't really so sad as he was just skin and bone like life. And he was thin, but laughed.
Okay, we'll have to go ahead and start. Family Fun Night is next Saturday. Sign-up sheets for chili, cornbread, soup, crackers is at the back of the church. Hope to see everybody there. Tuesday, kind of stay near your phone to see if the weather permits. Knowing Lawrence, if we get snow, it probably will be thawed by like 11 o'clock. But last time we had our little snow, which didn't even cover the green on the grass, we had all the businesses downtown closing, which, you know, I'm from Virginia and up Maryland, up that way. It's kind of amazing to me, but it does get slippery out there. So listen or look on your phone to see if Alona's Bible study is on. I'm going to bring chicken soup, assuming it goes, but hopefully it will. You know, they're always calling snow and we don't get it. Season Saints is approaching. I haven't heard any. It looks like there's a sign-up sheet at the back for the Season Saints. So if you'll sign something up there. What? Oh, menu. I'm sorry. I thought you said venue, and I was going to say, yeah. Yes, menu. It says soup, salads, and desserts, and I guess we'll check in the back, see what they're asking to bring. Baptist Crisis Center and Memorial Home, don't forget them. The men said this morning there were about 35 people. They fed, had a good turnout of men, 9 men. So everything went well. The flowers are in memory of Warren Cook. We'll want to still keep them in our prayers. I heard that Bob Dominic will probably be heading to NHC for rehab against his protests because he's weak again. And he's having a little mix-up of days and nights and kind of doesn't want to be there, but I don't know if we want to get together a meal or two, and I guess I'll call Mary Ellen or text Mary Ellen because I believe Charlotte's staying with her.
I talked to him last night. He said right now they're okay.
Who's he? Jamie?
Jamie.
Jamie, okay.
They're okay.
He said they're okay now. Any other sick people? She is. Well, that's good news. That is very good news. When did they move her? Friday.
Went to Cecil's house.
Yeah, she's at Cecil's house,
Good.
and she's not going back to NBC right now.
Okay, good. That's good news.
And Bob Bruish is home.
Kim Penland's thinks she has strep throat.
Ah, poor thing. Yeah, Paula and her family lost a dog that, 20 years old at least. They knew eventually they were going to have to put her down, and Saturday was, they had to. So she's upset. It's not Whiskey, it's the other one. Maggie, okay. So it's always hard to lose a favorite doggy. Do you know anybody else needs to go in the prayer list?
Mike Schatz, well, Mike and Linda Schatzker. Mike has cancer. He has to go for an ultrasound on Tuesday, and Linda has pneumonia.
Dang.
Yeah. So we can pray for them. She says she has 2 days to get her act together to get him to his ultrasound.
Are you writing these down for the pastor?
No.
Okay. And that Gail is home.
Oh, you know what? I've got Mike on the prayer list.
Okay, well, you can take Gail's NHC off.
Yeah, okay.
And she
Who else
said
did we have?
Bob Brewington, you said, is home? Yes, he's
Bob
gone,
Brewington is
yeah.
home?
is home. You can take Steve off there. Although Doug would probably say you still need to pray for him because he lives with me.
Did Donna get to have her treatment? Does anybody know? Did Donna, she didn't get to have it this
No,
week?
I don't know.
Oh,
She's waiting on her numbers to go up, you know, that I knew, but,
she didn't know that day when she went.
no.
Okay, so, Steve, do you want to open us with prayer?
Sure. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you on this beautiful, foggy, Sunday, damp day, knowing that the moisture we need is, you're giving it to us. But also we ask that you watch over those who are traveling today, all this week, and watch over our nation's capital as tomorrow we inaugurate a new president with a transfer of power. We ask for peace and tranquility, but we also want to come before you this day as we continue to study Ecclesiastes. Beautiful Ann, she brings us our message, and Pastor Clyde as he brings us our sermon today. But we want to thank you for many, many blessings. And watch over those who are on sick list, and those that have left the nursing homes, and those going to the nursing home, be with them and their caretakers. We say this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, Ecclesiastes, we're on chapter 2. And it may seem in some of these there's a lot of repetition, but I think that you'll begin to see how the message of the Lord comes through in what Solomon does and diaries on his journey. Starting off with verses 1 through 11, and you guys should have chapter 2 handout. If you don't, you can look up in your Bibles the verses 1 through 11. At the start of chapter 2, Solomon seeks to find out if satisfaction can be found in pleasure and folly. This grand experiment included engaging in pleasure because that was the reward for his labor, stimulating his body with wine, taking on vast building projects, owning male and female slaves who could serve his every desire, owning flocks and herds of animals, providing himself male and female singers and many concubines, because back then they didn't have iPhones. amassing for himself vast amounts of gold and silver. What does he find from all these things? First off, mirth. Mirth is madness and it accomplishes nothing. So he got, I guess, the comics of the day in. Maybe if you just laugh about everything, this deep darkness within him might begin to go away. Entertainment, constant entertainment, I assume, is part of what mirth is talking about. But he found out that really it's just kind of a sham, kind of a mask, masking the problems within. It's a lie and is not meant to be sustained forever in this life under the sun. In the end of a life of constant excitement, where is life's meaning? Once again, he uses the word vanity. What about pleasure? Whatever he wanted, he had, and he did not deny himself anything in a pursuit to find meaning to mortal life. He found it all to be vanity again. What about the satisfaction of worth and accomplishments? As humans, God made us to work, and we can find pleasure in it. I know if you go out and mow the lawn, you feel satisfied at the end of it. If you clean up your house, if you cook a good meal, if you do any of this stuff where it has a definite end and you can look at what you've done, there's a good satisfaction, a job well done, something you wanted to do and you accomplished, because that's how we're wired. We're not meant to sit and watch the Home Shopping Network and the, what do you call them? The housewives of, the desperate housewives of wherever city you want to clue into, or like Steve and I watch lots of British murder mysteries. That's our binge watching. But we can't do that all the time. We have to get up and do something where we feel like we've accomplished something. So Solomon made great houses and planted vineyards, gardens, and orchards. Now, he didn't do it himself, kind of like you and I would have to get out and mow the lawn ourselves, or work in the yard ourselves, or muck out the stalls ourselves. He didn't do it himself. However, he orchestrated having all these done. He made pools of water to water the trees, and I've heard that although everything that he built kind of went down, the walls of some of the cisterns that he had built to hold water for his vineyards still stand to this day. But out of all he accomplished, that's about it. He acquired servants, herds, flocks, and had possessions more than all who were in Jerusalem before him. And actually, at the end of the day, he was the richest man on the known earth at that time. He was a wise and efficient organizer and used his riches and possessions to create things that man could build. Surely the legitimate feeling of building and creating would have given meaning to his all too brief life. But in verse 11, he says, "Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping at the wind. There was no profit under the sun." There are many things we can learn from Solomon's personal experience. When Solomon looks at his works, accomplishments, wealth, bounty, he felt he deserved all the wonderful things he experienced. However, on investigation, Solomon found these things meaningless because he excluded the spiritual aspect of his experiences. What does this say to us? Solomon's grand experiment seems to be the pursuit of sinful lusts, but the sin in this case may not primarily be the pursuit of pleasure. God made us to have pleasure in this life. but in being distracted from our relationship with God. Because Solomon strayed from God, he became vulnerable to the same temptations we face today: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life. The things Solomon strove to achieve and acquire were not inherently bad. They simply could not satisfy his need for significance. Solomon tried all the things that others still try to achieve today, to create something of lasting significance and or a memorial for himself. How do you establish a memorial? Some of us feel that our memory will live on in the children we produce and in their children and so on and so forth. However, I have a bunch of old photos left over from my great uncle James, and that we acquired from my great grandmother, and on and on. I look back on a bunch of the photos, some of them up to my great grandmother I remember. A lot of those people, I have no idea who they are, who they were, what their lives were, anything like that. They're just images, just like a stranger. So the memory only lasts so long. It's like trying to talk to a young person about what things were like in the 60s or in Vietnam. They just look at you like, what? What? How do you establish a memorial for yourself? You can't. No material thing can achieve this goal, because if you have the big statues, things like that, they're eventually going to come down. Look at Rome. Look at the Greek Empire. Look at Constantine's empire. All the different things are eventually going to fade. Many people think that if they had everything that Solomon had, they would find happiness, satisfaction, and meaning to their lives. You can go down and buy you a ticket for the lottery, hoping you'll win that 300 million or 100 million, whatever it is at the time. But if you look back on a lot of the lottery winners, they go broke in just a few years, and they don't find any satisfaction. A lot of times, I was hearing about one in a sermon I'd listened to in researching this, and it was a guy and his wife. They won like 100 million, something like that, 300 million. You know, you get up past 100 million, you don't even start counting, I guess. But he had lost a daughter and a granddaughter to drug addiction and death as a result of overdoses. And he directly attributes his too much money to that. He didn't know how to handle it. The people in his house didn't know how to handle it. Sometimes, I think that's why people with extraordinary wealth will put things in trust for their kids, because they don't know how to handle it. You guys remember Jackie Kennedy's second husband, Aristotle Onassis? His daughter inherited all his wealth. I think I've talked about her before. And she and her daughter both died of suicide because they couldn't fight the depression. Now, she had millions. She probably was a billionaire in today's money, but she killed herself. There is something lacking if you have that God hole in your life. Others think that their immortality is based upon their being remembered by other people, and I think I've talked about that just a minute ago. This too is futile. For a while, people can find contentment and self-worth from things only to learn later they are meaningless. Solomon had all these things and found them to be empty. The only thing that was meaningful and lasting was that which was accomplished for God and his kingdom. And even that, even though Solomon built the temple of God that David had been denied to do because of the wars he fought and his dalliances with Bathsheba, even those would be destroyed when Israel turned from God, even though it was a godly thing, a temple where God said he would reside and his people could come and worship. In many ways, Solomon's realization that worldly pursuits were empty was among his greatest and wisest insights. And we go on to verses 12 through 23. Here Solomon compares wisdom with madness or folly, and he's not talking about, the seeing words from God or being able to discern things that God allows him to do. This was in order to define what wisdom was. He concluded that humanly wisdom was far superior to folly, which means not being wise, in affecting people. Wise people had enlightened understanding, while fools turned to earthly things, thus walking in spiritual and intellectual darkness. However, ultimately, both a wise man and a fool die the same death. First, Solomon states, what can a man do who succeeds the king? We're talking about him and David, I suppose. Or he could be referring to his own son who will come after him. I think I said that Solomon only had one son, although he had a plethora of daughters. There's some conjecture that, he had like 1,000 wives. And they found medically that sperm that are male, produce a male baby as opposed to female baby, are better produced when it takes, you don't have relations every day. Of course, I would come to this part when the youngin' walks in. So it could be just too many wives and concubines was his problem. But whatever the reason, he had one son, and he did prove to be a fool. And under his watch, you find Israel and Judah splitting, and many of the tribes splitting off from one another. Solomon knew what kind of king his son would be. Having to hand over the reins of power and all that he had done to another eats up Solomon's heart, because he begins to realize this is, we think, towards the end of his reign, towards the end of his life. And we begin to think that perhaps these regrets, Steve, can you help her down? Towards the end of his life was where some of this regret came from. All that Solomon did, all that he accomplished, all that he has, and he still dies the same death as the most clueless fool on earth. So why was he made wise? So he can perceive the irony and irrationality of this situation. It's almost like cruelty at this point to him. Solomon comes to the conclusion that no matter what he has accomplished or built or amassed, he will leave them all to the man who comes after him. Will that man be wise or a fool? No matter what, once Solomon dies, nothing is his. And you'll find this in people trying to not overplan their funeral, but trying to say, well, I'm not going to give this set of china to this child because I know they wouldn't appreciate it. I don't want to give up this material thing because I know nobody will appreciate it. This all needs to go to a museum, and the museum has no interest in any of that, unless it's really historical. But we tend to think about different things like, almost like they contain a part of us because we have become attached to them. I'm here to tell you, naked we came into the world, and naked we're going out, except for the nice outfit that you wear. There's nothing that we have that is going to last when we step over except that part of our heart that has been blessed by the Lord. Okay? So it's the internal that we have that is leaving us. And it's our choice whether in this life we can let go of things or in the next life. I'm not sure how that works. Haven't been to heaven. None of those out-of-body experiences, anything like that. But I trust that the Lord will handle it in his compassion. So I'm willing to lean on that. But back to Solomon. Turns out Solomon's fears were well-founded. His son Rehoboam was a fool. Not only that, as I said, under Rehoboam, the mighty state of Israel split into Judah and Israel. Perhaps Solomon received the prophetic judgment that God had pronounced in 1 Kings 11 through 12. Solomon had allowed his many wives and concubines to turn his heart away from God and began worshiping many pagan gods. And you know how it is. Keep peace in your house. Sometimes you do things. It's not your way, but, you get out the menorah at Christmas time. Things like that. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during my lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. And it says something that a lot of the reason Solomon lasted as long as he did was because David was a man after God's own heart. David made tons of mistakes, and he was not necessarily always wise in what he did. And he was not always just in what he did. But he loved the Lord and had an intimate communication with the Lord, I think, all his life. He had many times to pay for things that he did. But here is the Lord accounting to Solomon mercy on just because David was a man whose heart was after God. You don't hear that said about Solomon. Back to Solomon. His heart despairs of all the labor he's done. He says of man, if death robs our work of meaning, then life is indeed sorrowful. Work is burdensome, and there is no rest or relief from the despair of a meaningless life. Surely this also is vanity. Back to verse 24 through 26. Solomon here proposes that man should enjoy the life that God gave him and recognize it as God's gift to him. Finally, an uptick to this. God gives us pleasure in our life. God gives us mercy. Right now, when I lay down at night, my stomach's full, I'm warm, I'm safe, I'm in a nice house, I have my doggies beside me and my husband. I live a very pleasurable life. I can do just about what I want to do. I don't have to wear a burqa, thank you, Lord. Man can find pleasure in the performance and success of his task as long as he is obedient to God. So we are meant, again, to find pleasure and happiness in our tasks that we do. God determines who enjoys the fruit of their labor. Even if it's mucking out the stalls, you can find satisfaction in it, I guess. Not my thing. When Solomon dwells on his lack of control, and I think that's what all this is about, is control, over who will inherit his property and power and how he will be remembered by history, he is discontent and despairs. However, he encourages others to choose to be grateful and find pleasure in the Lord's gifts. These verses hint at a faith Solomon once had in God's goodness and sufficiency. And if you read this chapter 2, you'll find he says, I did this, I acquired this, I made this, I own this, I have this. Gone is his humility in asking the Lord for wisdom to rule. Instead, he seeks to wrest control out of the hand of God and attribute all the multitude of things that came to him in his life as being from him. Although, as a wise man, he should have known better. Just like Solomon, we have to choose to be frustrated. We can choose to be frustrated or angry that we are not in control of what happens around us or to others, or we can choose to see the bounty God provides in our lives. In order to do this, we have to make the choice daily to relinquish control, and boy, is that hard. Seeking to find satisfaction and joy in life separates us from a true relationship with God. Let me try that again. Seeking to find satisfaction and joy in life separate from a true relationship with God leads to futility. God's design for man is to enjoy fellowship with himself. And now I think we have actual time, yes, to get into some of the questions, which we didn't last week.
One of that verses, well, really, 18 through 21, I thought was weird. That Solomon, I'm gonna read 21 again. He's looking back and thinking of all his stuff that he's done. And in 21 he says, when there is a man who has labored with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, then he gives his legacy to one who has not labored. This too is vanity and a great evil. For what does a man get in all his labor and his striving which he labors under the sun? I can't believe he's so, I guess, vain or upset about what to give. I mean, heck, one day I'm not going to be here. I don't mind giving all my stuff to my children. He's like, well, none of them worked hard like I did. Why should I give it to them? That seems to be his kind of attitude. But he's not going to be here tomorrow. So who's going to get all that stuff? I just thought he really kind of selfish.
It was all about,
About him.
throughout the chapters, it was all about him.
Yeah, about him. Anyway, I just thought that was.
Okay, and we are not going to force anybody to share like it says, but we'll just kind of run down some of these. And I guess this is what Steve just said. In order to avoid the emptiness Solomon experienced, what attitudes should we have towards our possessions? And that's hard when you've worked really hard for something or got something that you really wanted for a long time, and then you acquire it, and it's hard, first of all, to see other people not put as much emphasis on it, like your kids, or people we might gift it to, or other things like that. It's hard to change our attitude towards it. But we have to remember, with all the things we have, I guess like it said in the book, you have to daily give up control to God in order to avoid it. But it leaves you with an emptiness when you feel disappointed about things, and it's sapping our energy and our attitude to have an emptiness that's associated with a material thing. And we are material in this world today. For instance, in my house, I have itty bitty closets. Because back in 1950, when it was built, you didn't have tons and tons of clothes like we do today. Although I try to keep mine pretty well cleaned out. But I know from my daughter-in-law, who can fill up a walk-in closet and another, and a chest drawer, and she subscribes to one of these clothing services where once a week or once every couple weeks or something, you get a brand new outfit and you can choose to accept it or send it back or whatever. I mean, she's got things that look exactly like other things she's got. I don't think she knows what all she has. And just as that's foreign to my generation, the stuff we have these days, it was foreign to the generations that went before us. We want something to eat, we just go to the refrigerator or go down to Burger King or, something like that. There's no question of eating today. Am I going to eat today? Fortunately, with all us having income, you don't have to worry about that. And that's very foreign. I grew up in the house because they went through the Great Depression. We lived with my great-grandmother, or she lived with us because they didn't do nursing homes in that day. You cleaned your plate, whatever was put there. And with my granddaughter, it's, please, will you take a couple bites of this? Please take a couple bites of that. No, my great-grandmother would have said, you don't want to eat it? Starve, see if I care. Something like that. That was parenting back in that day. That and go pick your own switch off the tree out there and bring it to me. Yeah. I think everybody knows Dolly Parton. Yeah, well, that's why they started printing patterns on flour sacks, because so many women were making clothes out of them. So, you wouldn't go and buy a little thing of flour, you'd buy a great big thing of flour. So, let's try another one. Define the providence of God. And if you want to, provide an example of how God's providence has worked in your life. And let me see what the definition of providence is. Definition, providence. It's the protective care of God or of nature as a spiritual power. So it's God's protective care. Is there any other definition where you might see the providence of God?
Well, it's, I think, I made a note here, it really has a lot to do with how we serve others, how we help others, because it's really important. It's like the men going to the memorial home today. We just offered a simple little service to help them out, share what God's done for us, and we share our blessings with them, just to help them out.
And so you're used by God for his providence. So he's given a blessing to them by using you all as his hands and feet, as we're told about many times. Yep.
So during the storm, we had one neighbor that had a
shower schedule.
was amazing. The only problem that we had was it wasn't wired up to the heater.
Ugh.
So after a while, we took cold showers, but we didn't care. So, yeah. So God, I mean, you know, the storm, didn't we, you know, neighbors helping each others and you know, get together and cutting down trees so you could get out of the driveway or go back on the road. So,
Everyone was in the same, they say boat, but everyone was in the same situation as the other. You had to depend on him. You had to meet neighbors that you didn't know because everyone had an ether in that time and still do, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And so God's providence sometimes works through us. He can do it. You know, He's not necessarily going to airdrop your medicine to your house or anything like that, but we can be, and I know Mott does that all week, every week with her using her driving skills. I don't know if Doug would call them skills, but we won't talk about that. To take food to people, to check on people, to visit people. I remember Molly and Peggy going around visiting all the time. That was a great gap in our ministry when the two of them died. But God's providence goes on, and He continues to use His people. Okay, number 7. Why was Solomon so upset over the prospects that fool and wise alike die? Are you upset over the prospect of death? And I think if anybody says, no, I'm not afraid of death at all, they're lying. But, you know, I could be wrong. I don't see how you could not be afraid of the unknown. We still step into it in faith, but I would think you would worry about it. Solomon was just kind of, he couldn't get over himself. You know, here's this attitude of his that I'm wise, I'm rich, I've done all this, I've built God's temple, and I'm going to die. What the heck is with that? You find it in today's generations that they live as if they're never going to die. They just move so fast to try to avoid the end of the story. They think somehow that this is not going to ever visit them, which we probably did when we were younger, and so now we're older, so we can get to say nah, nah, nah to them.
I don't think they ever think about it. Donaldson, the younger generation, I don't think they think about their mortality as we do as we get older, more mature.
Yeah, kind of the Peter Pan syndrome where I'm never going to grow up, I'm never going to die.
Young people are in that magic bubble.
Yep,
Nothing's gonna happen to them.
nothing will happen.
Well, today I'm not afraid of dying because I know one day I will die. I'm just asking God, hey God, give me another couple days so I can finish some of the other stuff I'd like to do, enjoy life, and really just enjoy. I think as we get older, I am enjoying each day as best I can. And if I die tomorrow, I know I'm going to go to Him. God's going to watch over me. But I need to try while I'm here to enjoy life, let other people know, hey, if you go down this path, buddy, you're going to end up in a who's cat, you know,
Or worse.
or worse, or whatever. Just like Solomon, I think, is telling us. I think in the end he tells us this, but as we read the Ecclesiastes, he made a lot of mistakes, and going to just kind of remind us, hey, you know, don't make the same stupid mistakes I made.
You don't have the despair attitude that I have.
I don't know that people are always afraid of death. I think afraid of the process of getting there.
and you say, oh, there's no way my child, my son, is capable of raising a child. I'm sorry, that's a grandma attitude.
Probably better than we think, you know.
You don't know my son. Not that I don't love him. He'd do fine. Yeah. Okay, the last one. What gives significance to your life? I guess partly our kids and grandkids. Um,
I'll answer that. Linda and I started, it's turned out to be a pretty big family considering our kids, our grandkids, now a couple of great-grandkids. What gives me significance in my life is I'm convinced that all of these people that we raised, and now they're raising their own, are people of faith, and they demonstrate it. Some stronger faith than others, yet they are people of faith, and even our grandkids who we're raising their children, two great grandkids, they are doing things in their life to instill a need for faith in our great grandkids. That's pretty big.
I think that you've just answered our question, what memorial lives on beyond you, beyond your remembrance, your faith can live on through passing on your faith to your children and things like that. That can be something that lasts after they've forgotten us and forgotten our grandparents and things like that.
And all this is because of the influence of their mama right here beside me.
Yay, Mom. Okay. You want to close us in prayer then?
Me,
Yeah, you.
are we online?
We're off. I'm getting ready to turn it
No,
off.
that's all right.
He just turned it on so I could talk.